Hey, I'm Allison Ryan. I am a reading specialist and the author of the blog Learning at the Primary Pond. And today in this live video, I am going to be sharing my #1 secret to staying energized as a teacher. As you're joining me, I would love to know what grade you teach, maybe where you're from, what you've been up to this holiday break, if you're still on break. But I am excited to share this with you. So let's go ahead and dive right in. All right, so the reason why I wanted to talk about this today, when a lot of us might be feeling good, right? Because it's kind of weird, like this is about staying energized and not feeling bad, and we're feeling good right now, a lot of us, right? I don't know about you, but I've been enjoying sitting on the couch and reading my book and seeing family over the holidays. So I personally feel good right now and I feel energized. But what I want you to think about, especially if you've been teaching for a while, is how you might feel come February. Because I don't know about you, but right when school starts back up, I'm feeling good, feeling rested. And then, the routine just kind of kicks in, and being a teacher is exhausting. And so then in the past, I've often felt kind of drained by like end of January, February, which is a bummer, right? Because we spend this time, relaxing, hoping that it lasts, and then sometimes it doesn't. So that's why I want to talk about this now, because it's not necessarily about what you do when you're already burned out, but what you do before then to prevent that. Hey, Jamie. And so in reality, there are so many strategies that I use to stay energized as a teacher and a person as a whole. This is, I'm calling this the one secret, and it is something that really helps me stay energized and joyful with my kids. But the reality is, if I eat cake and get 2 hours of sleep a night, even though that's not what we're talking about now, then I'm not going to stay energized as a teacher, right? Like, I work out every day. I swear by that. Try to get enough sleep, make time for friends. There's lots of things that I do to stay energized, like as a person. But this one thing is really about keeping the joy and the energy in my teaching year after year. And this thing is not something that I like researched and then started doing. It's something that I kind of was doing and it felt good. And then I later learned that there's actually research behind it, and there's actually some substance to it. So that's why I wanted to share this with you. Again, I see other people joining us. Feel free to let me know where you teach, what grade level you teach, and then your thoughts on this as we get into it. Okay, so the secret is, drum roll, incorporating the right amount of newness or novelty into your teaching. And so I find that this applies to my own personal life, my professional learning, and my students' learning. So we're going to talk about both of those things. So I want to talk first about like the brain research and how novelty affects learning and happiness. So in the brain, and I'm not a scientist, but what I've learned is that the hippocampus in our brain is involved in discovering, processing, and storing new sensory impressions. And so when the hippocampus senses something new, it likes that. And it sends dopamine to certain parts of the brain. And you may have heard of dopamine before in different contexts, but what dopamine is it's a neurotransmitter that plays an important role in learning, motivation, mood, and attention. And all of that stuff is important for our kids, right? Like, we want to have happy classrooms. We want our kids to be motivated, in a good mood as much as possible, paying attention. These are all good things. And they're good things for us too, right? Being motivated, being in a good mood. So there have been some studies done, and they show that novelty seems to promote memory, which is great information for us to have. So when something is new, kids tend to remember it more, which might sound a little odd because sometimes kids need repetition to actually remember something. But going back to that dopamine, it stands out to kids. And I'm saying kids, but it's teachers too. It's adults, it's everybody. When there's something new, there was a study done where they were like showing people a series of pictures, and when the pictures had like more new items in them, people actually remembered them more as opposed to pictures of things that were familiar to them. So I thought that was really interesting. This tells us that doing something like starting a lesson with something new and interesting can help prepare students to learn because it gets that dopamine firing. It's good in their brain. And I also think about our own happiness and well-being as teachers because a healthy amount of novelty seeking, which means seeking out new stuff, is linked to greater life satisfaction. And this is kind of a random connection, but I just thought I'd share this because I do feel I'm not like somebody who tries to go and skydive or like scuba dive or anything, like I'm not like a huge like thrill seeker, I would say. But with small things, even like I really like going to the grocery store and like finding a new product, or I can't like eat the same thing like too often in a row. I want something new. But I see that in my own life in small ways, like beyond the classroom. So I definitely see that as being relevant. So let's talk a little bit about what this looks like in practice. Paula, I love that. She says, I agree, I'm in my 30th year, but I'm always looking for new ways to do things. And I bet, Paula, that you have been able to hang in there and teach for 3 decades because you are always looking for new ways to do things. I love talking to teachers that have been teaching for, 20, 30, 40, even 40 years. And what I find with so many of them that are still in the classroom and enjoying it is that they are seeking out new things and they're continuing to learn for sure. That's awesome, Paula. Thank you for sharing that. So this is how I incorporate this concept for my students. And again, I really stumbled onto this. I didn't know this information. I was doing things, incorporating novelty into my classroom and into my like professional learning without knowing how important it was. And then I went back and learned that, yes, it's not just all in my head, like there really is something in this. But anyway, I want to share how you can incorporate novelty for your students without also burning yourself out. So the first thing that might sound counterintuitive, but it really helps, is having a routine for novelty. So having a plan, not just kind of like flying by the seat of your pants and being like, oh, maybe I'll do something new this week or this week. When I think about this, I think about my centers, and I used to introduce all my centers on one day and then like on Monday, and my kids would kind of be like, ooh, like too much information overload. It was a lot of new stuff, but it was too much. And so I do like to introduce new things into my centers, even if it's just like, if it's like swapping out the writing utensil or something like that. So what I do instead now is I have this routine where on Monday, I'll like swap something out little, or it could be an entire activity in one center. And then on Tuesday, I'll swap something out in a different center. So the kids get like that little dose of novelty, even if it's just, hey, we're using markers instead of stamps now. They get that little dose of novelty every time we go to centers. And that's exciting for them. But at the same time, I'm not burning myself out because I know that routine. I know that on Monday, I'm always going to switch something out in my word work center. On Tuesday, I'm always going to switch something out in the writing center. So that routine helps me introduce novelty without overwhelming myself or overwhelming my kids. Hey, Heidi. And so on that kind of train of incorporating novelty in simple ways that don't burn you out, here are just some really small changes, adjustments you can make to change things up throughout the year. So one thing you can do is change the format of how you're presenting information to kids. So, we might read them a book often, so they learn like a science topic. And of course, like I'm a literacy specialist. I love read alouds, but maybe you can find some kind of video clip on YouTube, preview it, make sure it's appropriate. Maybe you can just show them an ebook instead of the actual book. Like that is entertaining to our little ones. A lot of us teach the little ones. Just showing them in that different format on the interactive board is engaging to them. Maybe you have an audio recording. I don't know like a ton of podcasts for kids, but there are actually podcast episodes for kids out there now. Maybe you can incorporate something like that would be understandable to them. Maybe you have a guest reader. I know a lot of teachers will have like a mystery reader where a parent will come in and read a book, or somebody else from the school will come in and read a book. Just something surprising and little. I have never known how to say this word. I'm pretty sure it's realia. You can tell me if I'm saying that wrong, but this is another way to incorporate novelty. So bringing in an object from your home, just an everyday object that has some connection to what you're learning. So for example, in kindergarten, you're working on the letter L, maybe you have a stuffed lion or a lamp. I don't know that you want to bring a lamp, but you get what I mean. It's just something tangible to kind of like wake up that brain, start the dopamine firing. It's interesting to kids and it connects to what you're working on. So really, yeah. Changing where you teach. Right now in Tennessee, it's not very warm. It's rainy, so I would not take children outside. But, you know, in the springtime, maybe you can take them outside. Maybe you can just move into a different corner of your classroom or like switch where your chair is. How simple is that, right? Like it's novelty. As long as it doesn't send your kids off the wall, it's just fun to make little tweaks like that. And it really requires no planning time on your part. Maybe your kids normally during writing workshop, they write at their seats like mine do. But maybe as a special treat once in a while, they get to take a clipboard and write somewhere else in the classroom, right? Small changes, you can still stick to those lessons that maybe you've taught for years, but those small changes really can get them excited and make a difference. And when my kids are excited, they're more likely to be on task, and that makes me super happy. So along this line, we want to provide enough routine and stability at the same time, right? A lot of kids, a lot of young ones really thrive on that routine, and kids with special needs may need that routine. You may need, if you have a child who will really be thrown off by some sort of novelty, you may need to talk to them ahead of time and let them know. So it is kind of a balance act, right? Between doing things in a routine and giving them that stability versus, you know, just throwing something completely new at them. So you may need to talk to them about things first. Surprises are nice, but you know your kids best and you know what will work with them or what might set them off. Another thing too is when you're introducing new materials, I just find that my own enthusiasm, this is something new. I have a surprise for you. I'm so excited about this. Like, I'm not always feeling it, but when I do bring the enthusiasm, even though I have to fake it a little bit sometimes, the kids get excited. And then I do get excited, even if I'm not in a fantastic mood. That little joyful edge that you bring, you know, that enthusiasm when you introduce something new can also make a big difference as well. This is just a little slide I wanted to show you. I actually meant to mention this earlier, but it's an example of how you can stick to a routine, but still incorporate novelty. So this happens to be just from one of my Literacy Center bundles, and it is a game called Spell and Score, and the kids learn how to use it, or you learn how to play it. They can play it with any word, so it's really interchangeable and flexible, but then they learn how to play it like in the fall, and then you can bring the same game out in the spring, like for St. Patrick's Day in this example, but the game looks a little bit different, but it's still the same game. So this is an example of how you can make the most of your time by not teaching like 4 million games. I find that my kids tend to forget the directions. I don't know about yours, but you can have set games, but like throw a little twist on them, have different decorations or themes, and it'll feel new to them. You introduce it like, hey, this looks new, you know, this is something different, but you already know how to play. And so this is a great way to incorporate novelty without, you know, going to a ton of extra work yourself. So I also said that I was going to talk about us as teachers. This newness, this novelty is really good for kids, but it's also good for us as adults. And when my kids are excited, then I do find myself energized, but there are still things that I do just for me as a teacher to keep myself energized, and novelty is one of those things. So I like to do what I call bite-sized professional development, and I call it bite-sized because, you know, I don't always have time to sit down and like read a whole professional book. I love reading, but sometimes I just don't have time to do that. And one other thing too is sometimes I feel a little bit overwhelmed because there's like so much on Pinterest or there's so much on Instagram, and it's like learning, so it's good stuff, but it can also be overwhelming. And sometimes I might see an idea that's not really related to what my area of focus is, and that can like distract me. So what I try to do is somewhat limit the input, the stuff that I'm seeing, the stuff that I'm learning, because learning is good, but it can also lead to overwhelm. So I like to do something like I'll read an article, or I'll read like part of a book, or watch a video or something on some topic that I'm working on in my teaching or in my coaching that's relevant to my goals. So I have to be clear on what I'm working on Am I working on my instructional coaching? Am I working on teaching phonological awareness? I kind of might have a focus for the month or for the year or for the quarter or whatever, and I'm really looking for stuff that aligns to my goal. So that's one way that I try to avoid being overwhelmed, by limiting what I put in. If I find something good on Instagram or Facebook, there's that little save button and I can save it for later. And I do that all the time, but I won't necessarily click through and read the post right away because it may not be relevant to what my focus is at that time. And it may end up distracting me or overwhelming me. So I try to filter out what I'm learning, make it bite-sized. I also enjoy learning alongside the kids. I have to tell you that some of my favorite lessons, some of my favorite experiences with children have been when I've discovered something weird or new about the English language, or when we're watching a video or reading something, or a child shares a book with me and it's new information. I love that experience. It helps me relate to my kids. It's fun for them to see me learning. It brings me a ton of joy, and that helps me stay energized. And along with that, trying to have a childlike spirit while you're learning alongside them, trying to discover things and see them through their eyes, because, we're much older than our K2 students, but it's fun to just bring it back down, play with them, learn with them. Those are like the best moments of my teaching. All right, so as we wrap up here, I do want to give you a little preview of my literacy clubs, because they're going to be opening on January 12th. I have my kindergarten literacy club that's reopening, and then the first and second grade literacy club that's opening for the first time. So I'm incredibly excited about that. And those literacy clubs are actually designed to incorporate some of this novelty for you. So when I was talking about bite-sized professional development, both of my clubs have a private webinar at the beginning of each month, and I do try to make it bite-sized. Oops, my picture went away. Let's see. Hopefully I'm still showing up. Let me know if I'm not still showing up. On my screen, I'm not showing up, but let me know. Anyway, I try to keep it bite-sized because, when you have like a full-length hour and a half webinar, I know that can be helpful, but it can also be a little bit too much, right? And so to have something like that you're constantly watching, it's a lot of information. So I try to keep it really focused. We go into depth on like one small topic, but it's not like tons and tons of overwhelming information. I also provide in the literacy club new materials for your students to use each month. So that helps you with that novelty without, Jamie says, I see you. Thank you, Jamie. That helps you with the novelty without you having to constantly come up with new stuff. It's just delivered to your inbox and you get it and you can use it with your kids. The materials still do follow a familiar format, so that, your kids are somewhat knowing okay, this is maybe similar to something we've done, but it's new. So again, that comes back to novelty, you having new stuff to use with the kids without it being overwhelming, and also without you having to do tons and tons of searching and extra work. I also love the literacy clubs because kindergarten knows, if you're in my kindergarten group from this past year, we truly have the most awesome group members. We have a private Facebook group that's just for the kindergarten literacy club, and they are so generous with sharing ideas. And I've learned so much from them, just from anything from things to do for the holidays, or what do you do if a child is struggling with something. I just love that we have our groups that are focused on certain grade levels so that we can share ideas, get new ideas, and keep ourselves learning and happy. All right, so as I mentioned, you can join starting January 12th. If you wanted to get on the wait list, it's kindergartenliteracyclub.com. I will put this here. Or first and second grade literacyclub.com. So you're welcome to get on the wait list. You get an email when those are ready. But I would love to know, before we sign off here, how are you going to create novelty for yourself and your students this year? I think it's so helpful to have a plan because I don't know about you, but if I have an intention, I can guarantee you, if I don't write it down or write it onto my calendar, in a month, I will have totally forgotten about it. So I would love to hear how you are going to create novelty for yourself and your students this year in a manageable way that doesn't feel overwhelming. So please feel free to share that in the comments. And even if you're watching later, feel free to share, and I will come back and chat with you about that. All right, so these are just my references. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope that this was helpful and a little bit inspiring for your year. Happy New Year, by the way. I don't remember if I said that at the beginning. I cannot wait for all the stuff I have planned for Learning at the Primary Pond this year, starting with some free webinars coming soon and opening the literacy clubs. But I wish you a wonderful 2020, and I look forward to chatting with you soon.